Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Attorney General, for being here. Have you spoken to Secretary Napolitano about Fast and Furious?
No.
Have you spoken with Secretary Clinton about Fast and Furious?
No.
Have you spoken to President Obama about Fast and Furious?
I don't think that I have. I see the President.
That's okay. If you haven't, you haven't. Have you spoken to the President of Mexico about Fast and Furious?
No.
Have you spoken to the Attorney General of Mexico about Fast and Furious?
I don't believe so.
You have routinely argued that you've been oblivious and disengaged in this operation, and I buy that to a large extent.
I'm not sure.
But we have a dead Border Patrol agent in Agent Terry. We have 2,000 missing guns. We have 200 deaths in Mexico. We had dead government officials in Mexico. We have a Mexican helicopter with troops in it that shot, 3 of which are wounded back in May of this year. We have 50-plus members of Congress calling for your resignation over this, and you've never spoken to any one of these people about this operation.
Well, first off, the notion that I am somehow oblivious to this matter is totally belied by these inconvenient things called the facts.
You took 5 days to go to the Caribbean. You didn't have 15 minutes to call Secretary Clinton, Napolitano, talk to the President or your counterparts in Mexico?
Understand something with regard to Secretary Napolitano. Our agencies have been in constant touch with each other about this issue because we are engaged, both of us, in the prosecution of the killer of...
Okay, so if you were intimately involved and engaged in this, remember, Agent Terry was killed in December, mid-December, and then we had Jaime Zapata, who was killed in Mexico, 2 officers shot February 15th. On February 16th, you and Secretary Napolitano issued a press release. It's titled, Secretary Napolitano and Attorney General Holder form a joint task force to assist Mexico's investigation into yesterday's shooting of 2 ICE agents in Mexico. At the very beginning of this press release, Secretary of Homeland Security Janet Napolitano and Attorney General Eric Holder today met to discuss this issue. And how is it that you and Secretary Napolitano said you never even talked or discussed, even brought up or had any discussion about Fast and Furious?
The press release that you talk about is not a Fast and Furious matter.
But
so you have to understand something, the way Washington works here, okay? The reality is that when it comes to matters that are under investigation...
But the death of Jaime Zapata was highly likely, that came from Fast and Furious. In fact, from testimony that we took from Agent Forcelli, and I'm going to read from this, is from January 8th of 2011, quote, and there was this sense like every other time, even with Miss Gifford's shooting, there was a state of panic like, oh my God, let's hope that this is not a weapon from that case. And the shooting of Mr. Zapata down in Mexico, I know that again, that state of panic that they had like, please let this not come back. So the agents on the ground were so concerned that this is going to happen. You and Secretary Napolitano have a discussion, and there's no discussion about even the possibility of Fast and Furious?
There is the meaningful conversations that happen between DHS and DOJ happen at lower levels between investigators.
But when you and Secretary, what did you and Secretary Napolitano talk about if you didn't talk about Fast and Furious, and it's the day after Jaime Zapata, and you were very quick to issue press releases?
Well, you're making an assumption that in fact is a Fast and Furious case. I'm not sure that...
We didn't know at the time. You didn't know at the time. I didn't know. Nobody knew at the time. Isn't it a reasonable assumption to suggest that it may have been guns from Fast and Furious that happened, that caused that death?
Given the fact that there are, over the course of the last 5 years, 64,000 weapons that have gone from the United States to Mexico.
I have a hard time believing, Mr. Attorney General, with all due respect, my time is short. Twice, the President of the United States has gone before the American people and said that you had nothing to do with this, you weren't involved in it, you weren't engaged in it, yet you said you've never spoken to the President. How is it that he would know that you haven't been involved, you weren't involved in this, and he can make such a claim if you've never even spoken to him about it?
Well, the President gets information from the Justice Department in a variety of ways. We interact with the White House counsel's office very frequently. I don't know exactly what the flow of information is within the White House, but he can find out about my state of involvement in matters connected to the Justice Department without speaking directly to
Let me move on to you have access to, obviously, the emails of Dennis Burke. On Wednesday, November 24th, 2010, He sent an email. It said, quote, "Some of the weapons bought by these clowns in Arizona have been directly traced to murders of elected officials in Mexico by the cartels. So Katie, bar the door when we unveil this baby," end quote. How is it that you've never had a discussion with your counterpart in Mexico about this? In fact, in Los Angeles Times article dated September 19th of this year, quote, "At no time did we know or were we made aware that there might have been arms trafficking permitted. In no way would we have allowed it because in an attack on the safety of Mexicans." It goes on in the article, actually the paragraph before, "And to this date," she said, "U.S. officials have not briefed her on the operation gone awry, nor have they apologized. What is unacceptable is that you and everybody in your organization, according to you at the higher-ups, know about this investigation. You don't have 15 minutes to pick up the phone, and we have still never talked to these people in order to solve this problem, because as you say, it's going to go on for some time."
We have taken steps, I have taken steps to solve this problem in that I've ordered an examination of this to determine exactly what happened. I have issued directives that this should never happen again. We have put in place measures at ATF so that this kind of thing won't happen again. What Todd Jones has done with regard to the reforms that he has put in place, I think, are going to be extremely effective. And I've made personnel changes with regard to
You haven't
those
fired anybody.
agencies.
Nobody's been fired.
The gentleman's time has expired. Does the gentleman want to respond to the last
I
question?
just was trying to say that I have made personnel changes with regard to the agencies that have been involved, and these are initial determinations that I have made. It is not all that I am possibly going to do. There is an impatience here, and in some ways I understand it, but the reality is that you have to do these things on the basis of evidence, on the basis of findings that are factually grounded, and when I am in that position, I will take the appropriate action. But I want to assure you and the American people that people will be held accountable for the mistakes that were made in Fast and Furious.
Okay. Thank you, Mr.